I had an experience that I shared at the church where some years ago I was working for a really large corporation and I was not hired as a spokesperson at all, but the communications team found out that I was a speaker. And so they asked me to start speaking on behalf of the company at different events and things. And I was like, sure. Well, I guess I did a good job because they started to ask me to do more and do media. And my manager at the time, at first, she was like, oh, this is great. You're doing a great job. Well, when my performance review came around, she was like, I think you're spending too much time doing all these speaking engagements. You need to focus on your core work. Mind you, my rating was excellent. So it wasn't like I wasn't doing what I was supposed to do. I was doing more. So she said, I need you to focus on your core work. So you're not doing any of that anymore. You just need to focus on your work. I went to the communications team and I was like, what is going on? And they were like, I don't know, this is crazy, but we have to honor what she says. Well, I thought that was it. Like she closed the door on that thing. But let me tell you how God works. So because I had been doing some different speaking engagements, people still reached out to me and they were like, hey, can you speak at this event on behalf of the company? And I said to them, I can't because I'm not allowed to do that. Well, as it turned out, I went to my communications team and they were like, well, as long as you don't, like use your company title, you can do the engagements as yourself. When I was speaking on behalf of the company, I couldn't get paid. But when I started to speak as Nona Jones, I could get paid.
Okay.
And so what happened was she closed that door and I had so much pain and I felt so rejected in that moment. But what was happening is she closed that door so that God could direct my attention to where he wanted me to go, which I never would have gone down that path.
Because you weren't raised in church, were you? You didn't.
I became a minister eventually, but I was not thinking of being a speaker at all. That's not something I
But even from a
do.
Little girl, were you in church? I'm assuming your mom didn't take it. And so how did you get to even knowing God? Like, how did you even get to that point? Because after so much rejection, it would produce every reason in you to believe that God wasn't real and God is awful and why would he allow this to happen? Because there are those who do believe in that or who do believe that. And I know that I'm going to keep it a buck. I've been in situations where I'm like, I've been raised in church my whole life, but I've still doubted God.
Yeah.
I still have had questions in my walk, and since I grew up in church from that point all the way through my 20s. And I've questioned God at points in my life and been like, how are you real, but you're letting this happen? Or how, and so for someone who didn't grow up in church, how did you get to the place where you believed and knew that God was real?
I don't know how I learned to do this, so I can't even tell somebody how to do it, but I've just always believed that God is good. And so when I experienced those rejections, instead of it drawing me away from God, it actually drew me closer to him. When I felt isolated, when I felt alone, I would turn to God in prayer. I would bring my pain to him in prayer. I would be very, very blunt, like, Lord, this is how I feel about this situation. Through tears, I would express, this is how it hurt me. And I knew that he was hearing me.
Yeah.
Like I knew I could trust God. And so that's why I think I've been able to hear the voice of God, even in times of pain, where I'm like, I know you're good. Your nature is to be good. So I don't understand this, but I'm going to bring it to you and I'm going to pray with you so that you'll help me come to a place of understanding because your word makes the promise that you'll work everything together for my good. And so I'm leaning on that promise. Now, I want to see you make it happen, right? But that's what I would do.
So even though going through that, your childhood and all the rejection that you experienced, what would you say is the thing outside of knowing that God was good, right? And knowing that he was with you, what keeps you? What keeps you in that knowing? Because I was telling you this in the kitchen earlier. I believe that a lot of people believe in Jesus.
Oh, yeah.
I believe that a lot of people believe in God. And I also know that I believe in a lot of people. I believe that Barack Obama exists.
Right.
I believe he has a wife named Michelle and 2 daughters. I believe I believe that Beyonce is real, and she has a husband and 3 children, and she's an amazing singer. But the difference is I don't know any of them. And I think that we have come to a place where Christianity, spirituality is a trend.
Yeah.
And I also see it as a mercy of God, because he's allowing people to have a hunger for something more. They're desiring something more, answers that they don't have. They're on a quest to find something, right? And a lot of people are being led to Christianity. But I don't know if a lot of people are being led to the knowledge of him. And that's it's one thing to believe, right? You believe that God was good. But then it's another thing to know that he's good. So what keeps you in that knowing? Like what was the moment for you where like, I know him and I know that he's real. And then what keeps you in that knowing?
Man, I so resonate with David's story because it was in those times of isolation, even as a child by myself, that I came to know who God is because he's all I had. And that makes the difference. Yeah. Like I didn't have brothers and sisters to talk to about my stuff. I didn't have other family members to talk to about my stuff. I didn't have other adults to talk to about my stuff. So I spent time with God when I was 12. Like, I mean, I started going to church when I was 11, accepted Jesus as Lord of my life when I was about 12.
Love that.
Started reading the Bible, like was on fire for God. I read the Bible by myself when I was 12.
Wow.
And so praying to God and just spending that time with him made the difference. That's how I got to know him. You know, using the examples you gave, it's like, yes, we know of the Obamas, we know of Beyonce and Jay-Z, but we believe that they exist, but we don't know who they are because we don't spend time with them.
Yes.
That makes the difference. And God is not, you know, a fly-by-night, drive-by experience. Like you have to actually tarry, spend time with him in prayer, find that quiet time, get away. We have to get to a place that we stop having intermediaries with God. Because first of all, the priesthood has been restored. Like, let me just pause there for a minute. So we seem to believe that it is a pastor or minister who is our intermediary with God. Like we have to go to them for prayer. We have to go to them for a word. And it's like, no, the Bible tells us that when Christ gave up the ghost, that the veil that separated the holy from the holies of holies in the temple was torn from top to bottom. It was ripped in two, which means that we now have direct access to God. We don't have to go through anybody.
Yeah.
Which is why we have to spend that time.
Yeah.
It's not about, well, let me wait for Bible study on Wednesday or I'll wait till we go to church on Sunday. It's like, no.
Yeah.
Like we are the priests. We are the intercessors, the intermediaries. So it's spending time with God. And I think that as I look back on it again, man, every rejection serves a purpose. I was rejected as a child. I was isolated. I was left alone so much that all I had is God.
Yeah.
So when David talks about, you know, it was the Lord who protected me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear, I know exactly what that means. Because I didn't have anybody in the house protecting me from my mom's boyfriend. I didn't even have anybody in the house protecting me when my mom was trying to strangle me. All I had was the Lord. And so I believe in him and I know him because I spent time with him.
Yeah.
And I would just encourage people when those rejections happen, instead of looking inward and asking the question, what's wrong with me?
Yeah.
We have to discipline ourselves to look upward and say, Lord, what are you trying to teach me?